All right, I'm back here to reassemble the gun. Like I said, I ain't gonna say much. I'm just gonna kind of show you. Of course, all your set screws have to be put back in once you're done, and just try to remember where they're at. But that retainer, that trigger pin housing goes in there, and make sure your spring is on your trigger pin. Press it in, and then thread your retainer back in here. And 7/16 wrench. Just snug it. You don't have to torque it super hard. And then I like to just press this trigger all the way down and put this longer bolt that they give you back in this hole, and just kind of get it to where it makes it where the trigger is just touching. Right now I still have a little bit of a gap, but you want it tight enough to where it's touching that button, okay? Where it can't flip out, but it's not that's why I say it's not really tight, but it's just kind of there to keep this handle from flipping up, and it plug in the air hole too. So you want to do that first. Next, piston goes into the piston housing here. Press it all the way in. Put this spring back in there. Then your end cap pushes back down in there. And I like to push in there and get it at a little bit of an angle so that it keeps that groove that the snap ring has to go in exposed. I place my snap ring here. And this is always fun. Sometimes I fail at this, but I'm getting better the more I do it. To release it and make sure it's all the way in that groove, and then you can kind of wiggle your end cap to make sure it comes back. Don't forget this spring here goes on first. And then, oh, something I might not have mentioned, there's two little flat spots that are etched into the sides. I think that's showing it good enough. That lines up with the two screws on this safety knob. So you want to make sure you notice where they're at, and that way you can line them up properly. So I'm going to look at that and then line them up. Then I press it down all the way. Take the Allen wrench that fits these and tighten these back up. Make sure you do both of them, or else you might lose the safety button if you don't get these tight in the right spot. I got those on there, and I give it a little test and make sure it's working. It's coming out, going in, looks great. All right, now I want to attach that to this handle. Make sure I put that O-ring back on that hole, and then you can just kind of hook the back of this back into the here and set it in place like that. And you got to line these holes up on the front. That's where these two screws drop in. So I'll drop those in there. Take my little T-handle, tighten these up. I don't like to tighten the one side up before the other. I kind of get it almost there, and then I go ahead and finish the other one off. And just get these nice and tight on there so that's all sealed up good. And then I like to run this back one in first and get it tight. And then, even though the safety button's on, you can still tighten these two. I know I took it off on the other video, but I'm sorry, getting out of shot there. But make sure you tighten all three of these screws down. All right, then next we're gonna put the mixing chamber onto the piston shaft. And you can tighten it on by hand. And I have learned that you don't have to torque this thing on there. But then again, right now when I put it on, the holes are facing weird, so it's okay to twist it a little bit, you know, but you don't have to torque it on there. That's going to do nothing but possibly bend the piston shaft, or even worse, break that thread off in it. So just kind of get it snug. That's all it got to do, because the reality is it's sitting in a square. It's not like it's going to be able to spin much. So anyways, when you get that on, make sure your holes are facing left and right and not up and down. You place that in there, and that'll kind of line everything up in there. Next step, You want to drop the bolts that hold the fluid block onto the there. Get those in, and you got a 5/16 nut driver. Here's another piece of advice: do not use a ratchet and put a lot of torque on these. There's little inserts in there that are in aluminum, and I've seen people strip them out. So just, you know, by hand with this type of nut driver, just tighten them up good and snug, and you're good to go. I've already popped these in. They basically just push in, no big deal there. But your side seals, you don't want to put them in until you got the block on, but you put them in, and same thing, tighten them up with the nut driver that's provided. And you want to get them in there good and snug. Now, if you ever see on the side here, if there's a thread showing, then you know it didn't go in all the way and something might be blocking it. Let me give you an example on the B side here. I'm going to just tighten it up. I've seen this happen a few times where you would thread it in, and that's where it would stop. It would have a little bit of a thread showing. You can see how this side's all the way in and this side has a thread showing still. Something may be blocking, so you might want to take it apart and look, make sure you got it good and clean, but get it nice and tight in there. And the last step, put your insert back in. Oh, another point, you're going to make sure that this thing's really clean and the inside of that mix chamber really clean, or else that won't make a very good seal. And then you put your air cap, kind of have to push on it a little bit. And another point I like to make, they give you a short wrench for a reason on this air cap. You don't want to be over torquing it. You want it to be tight, but if you use a big crescent wrench, you're going to break the threads right off the front of that mixing chamber. So just get it good and snug. And that's how you break down the gun, and I pointed out some, you know, exactly what you have to do to clean it. I hope these videos series was a help to you. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, or you could even call me. My number is 936-558-3307. But that's the Boss Gen 2 gun. Hope you learned something.